This Thompson Chain Reference Bible Companion, he actually says right here, he says that some say that the pastoral epistles reveal a more advanced church organization than we find in the rest of the New Testament, and presumably too advanced for Paul's day, based on the mention of bishops or overseers, and the elders or presbyters and deacons in what seems a firmly established church organization of a latter day. However, on his first missionary journey, Paul ordained elders in every city, Acts 14:23. Another reference indicates the presence of pastors and teachers at Ephesus, Ephesians 4:11, while in Philippi, bishops and deacons were active, Philippians 1:1. It was a very simple organization in which no sophisticated hierarchy was involved. In these early days, the titles of church officials were not clearly defined. Some of them were interchangeable, e.g., overseer for elder, Titus 1, 5, verses 5 through 7. So these were actually poor people. These weren't the money-making scoundrels like we see in the world today who are just getting rich off of selling a false Christ. And then right here in History of the Church by Philip Schaff and Apostolic Christianity. I believe that's his name. Let me see, just to make sure, verify that fact. Yeah, Philip Schaff. So this is Apostolic Christianity, which means the very beginnings, right? So it actually says right here, Peter also warns against hierarchical ambition in prophetic anticipation of the abuse of his name and his primacy among the apostles. And that's why Peter warned you of that in 1 Peter chapter 4, and then and in 1 Peter chapter 5, because right here he explains that he explains. Let me see. It's been a little while since I looked this up, so let me see. Oh yeah, right up here he says. Oh yeah, right here he says, "But let none of you suffer as a murderer, or as a thief, or as an evildoer, or as a busybody in other men's affairs." Now this episkopos means bishop, so bishoping over other people. So a bishop isn't someone who's going to be a meddler. He's going to ensure that people are upholding the word of God, and that's why they're going to want to kill the bishop. That's why all of the apostles were persecuted and most of them murdered. So right here in Ante-Nicene Christianity by Philip Schaff, he over here, this is a quote by Clement. It says, "So for example, in the well-known passage of Clement, as if one should be changed from a man to a beast after the manner of one charmed by Circe, so a man ceases to be God's and to continue faithful to the Lord when he sets himself up against the church tradition and flies off the positions of human caprice to fluctuate, be whimsy, fickle, so to just be tossed to and fro." And Circe is where the word church comes from. I've done a lot of research on that on my other videos. I have a whole library on just Circe alone. That's where the word church comes from. The ecclesia, the called out, isn't the same as church. So those are a couple of the warnings there against these false church systems that are going on. And oh yeah, right here in this book right here, he's explaining that during the translation of the King James Bible, it was all about politics. So he says what he would not tolerate, however, was any suggestion of his own royal authority being questioned. The royal supremacy over church and state was the foundation of his position as King of England, the very reason he felt so at home in this marvelous new country he had inherited. The melding of secular and religious authority had been the secret at the heart of the immensely successful Tudor monarchy. So melding these things together. And the new churches had established themselves as powers quite distinct from and independent of the state. So that was becoming a problem for their power. So up here he says they had to establish themselves as politically loyal, even while asking for changes to the state religion and the form of the state church. And this is talking about the people who, like I believe it was the Puritans. Yeah, so the Puritans were having problems because they couldn't say anything against his power. And it was equally critical for the bishops to conflate them. Throughout the summer, the bishops maintained that any questioning of the doctrine and articles of the Church of England was politically subversive, dangerous, and to be expunged. Anti-Puritan propaganda flooded the country because they didn't want the Puritans up there telling the truth. They're just trying to take power away from the Pope. So it says they wanted to distinguish themselves from the true extremists who took from the New Testament that each congregation should be independent and free of all worldly authority. Oh, like the New Testament? Yeah, that's right. But as faithful servants of Christ and loyal subjects. And then, let me see. There was another one I wanted to read. Let me see. Oh, yeah, right here. So they addressed James. They said neither as factious men affecting a popular parity in the church, no hint of getting rid of the bishops, because that's what they're saying. They're talking about getting rid of the bishops, nor as schismatics aiming at dissolution of the state ecclesiastical. They wanted to distinguish themselves from the true extremists who took from the New Testament that each congregation should be independent and free of all worldly authority. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to follow Christ, even if that means that they come to your house and burn your house down. So, okay, that's just a couple. And I had said that I was going to do one more. If I run out of time, sorry. I'm just, I got to go and search for another book that I have. Where is it? My books always disappear. You know what? It's out in my car. All right, so but even right here in this book right here, the Light from the Ancient East, he's explaining to you that the original Christians were poor. They're not these like rich people nowadays. It was poor people. So let me see. All right, so it talks about here. I'll just read a little bit here. This fatal generalization involves, of course, a great mistake. The upper classes have been simply focused with the whole body of society, or, to employ another expression, primitive Christianity has been compared with an incommensurable quantity. By its social structure, primitive Christianity points unequivocally to the lower and middle class. Its connections with the upper classes are very scanty at the outset. Jesus of Nazareth was a carpenter, Paul of Tarsus a tent maker, and the tent maker's words about the origin of his churches in the lower classes of the great towns form one of the most important testimonies, historically speaking, that primitive Christianity gives of itself. Primitive Christianity is another instance of the truth taught us with each return of springtime, that the sap rises upward from below. Primitive Christianity stood in natural opposition to the high culture of the ancient world, not so much because it was Christianity, but because it was a movement of the lower classes. The only comparison possible, therefore, is that between the Christians and the corresponding spiritual province among the pagans, that is, the masses of the ancient world. So it goes on and on. Yeah, so Christianity was poor. That's why so much stuff, you can't even find out a lot of its beginnings, is because it didn't, most of the educated men were the rich people, and the people who could afford to really write it down and take care of it and education. Education is having a lot of educated people is a fairly novel thing as a result of the Industrial Revolution. So, anyways, that's all I got for y'all for now, and thanks for watching. So we learned a little bit about the hierarchy of the church, and the original hierarchy was that there was no hierarchy. It was poor people who came in fellowship together, as we can see from 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and 1 Corinthians chapter 10, like 1 Corinthians chapter 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Those are all good ones about the original church and how it operated. So, all right, thanks for watching, guys. Bye.